quarter of a century ago, our guest today published a book about the future of technology called Life After Television. Quote, "The computer of the future will be as portable as your watch and as personal as your wallet. It will recognize speech and navigate streets, collect your mail and your news." Close quote. Our guest is worth listening to today, in other words, in large measure because he got so much right back then. His new book, Life After Google. Bruce Gilder on Uncommon Knowledge.
Here's the thing. There's been many historical eras throughout history. These distinct eras have had huge impact on society and economies. These areas are often characterized by a shift in technologies as well as economic structures. We've seen it in the agricultural revolution. That era was marked by a transition away from hunting and gathering to a more settled agriculture. So people living in communities and having everything there, right? Storing grains in silos and keeping food for the winters. Then we shifted to the Renaissance period. And this period was filled with a need for artistic and intellectual expression. People looking for higher philosophical things. Think Socrates, Plato. And then as we moved into the 15th to the 17th century, we had a lot of exploration during that time. The age of exploration was marked by people like Christopher Columbus and, people venturing off and going to other areas, wanting to see what was out there. And what did this do for society and mankind? It increased trade. It increased opportunities for a lot of people to make a lot of money. Then we move into the Enlightenment period. And that period came along in the 17th to the 18th century. And that was marked by science and reasoning and individualism. And it's actually the mark of our founding fathers, where they started having their own political beliefs and it started shaping our democracy. And then we saw the digital revolution, which started in the mid-20th century. And we know that without this, we would not be where we are today. Changes in technology, telecommunications, all of this stuff came forward in the mid-20th century. The digital revolution goes hand in hand with the information age. And information is key. When you have information, you can do wonders. This digital boom changed the way that we learn, interact, and how we manage our life, right? So then we look at the post-industrial movement, and that came after we started realizing that things could be done quicker if we started using things like computers or automation. And, here's the thing. Once you start putting a lot of focus on knowledge-based industries, who's to say that computers won't take those jobs? Because computers are by far, if you want to realistically think about it, smarter. They can compute faster, right? And although we have very smart people out there that manages computers, the computers can still do the task faster than we can. Then you have the environmental movement, and while not marked by a single era, because it's ongoing, right? It does matter because our survivability relies heavily on how we treat our environment. And the reason I'm showing you this is I'm going to get to the point of this with what George Gilder is talking about. All of these things have the potential to make a lot of money. And there are winners, there are victors, people that come out at the top of the food chain with this. And while we have the big old world that we can all inhabit and have free everything, free electricity, free water, free everything, because Nikola Tesla even proved that energy was free, and that's for a whole other video. The fact remains is all of this wealth is in the hands of a top select few. And it happens that way because there's people that know how to hoard that information and that wealth for themselves. We can thank people like Jeff Bezos for this. Sergey Brin, Google founder guy. We can thank these people for this. The exponential amount of wealth that they have, it's unnecessary. It really is unnecessary. If you get a move on something first, if you get the heads up on something first and you take advantage of it, you will become a successful person. That's just how it works. So I'm telling you this, and I'm doing all of this in this video to show you what the next boom will be. Take the time to Google his name and find out what he talks about in the whole videos. I'm showing you clips of what he's talking about because one of the major takeaway from his videos and from what he talks about in his books is that basically there are ebbs and flow in society. There's booms and busts, and that's with everything in life, right? There's moments of great success and then moments of downtime. that's just the way the world works. You can't be on 100% all the time. He says a lot of the technologies that are going on today are hugely deterministic, that they rely heavily on something to happen in order for an outcome to happen. And here's the thing, there's only so much you can do with technology like Google before it becomes antiquated or outdated, especially with the population growth that we have. And I totally agree with George Gilder that blockchain is the next way, is the way of the future.
You just called them delusional. I heard that right?
Yep. There are a lot of delusional, brilliant Marxists in the world. Don't you encounter them all the time? I mean, you live at Stanford.
We will return to your attack on Google, but first, how did they do it? It is an accomplishment of some kind.
Oh, it's an absolutely fabulous accomplishment. They dominated this era. This is the Google era. We live in it. But the next step is to upload your mind into the Google cloud. And I balk at this next step in the Google system of the world.
You spent some time in Life After Google describing the DAOs, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a huge Google data center up in Oregon. In Life After Google, you write of the diminishing returns of big data. The delusions come next. First, there are certain almost physical constraints. We've reached the point now at which, no matter how big your data center, improvements in parsing data are only going to be incremental.
Some of you are going to love blockchain. And what he talks about is blockchain being the way. All right. And how that works is, try to imagine you have a notebook that many people use to write down their transactions. Let's just use transactions. Instead of having a central authority manage said notebook, everyone would have a copy of that notebook. Whenever anyone wants to add a transaction to that notebook, they would add it to the group. Here's where things get interesting. Before someone adds a transaction to that notebook, everyone has to agree that that transaction is valid, that it is real. They do it by solving a puzzle, like a math problem. The first person to add or solve that puzzle gets to get that transaction. Then obviously everybody checks to make sure that it's correct, it's verified. If everything is correct, that transaction gets added to the notebook and everyone is updated with its copies. Now, because everyone has a copy of the notebook and they all agree on the transactions, it's really hard for someone to cheat. If someone tries to cheat an old transaction or add a fake one, everyone else will notice because their copies of the notebook won't match. This is similar to how a blockchain works. Instead of a physical notebook, it's a digital ledger that stores transactions in blocks. Each block is linked to the previous one, creating a chain of blocks, hence the name blockchain. And just like in our notebook example, to add a new block of transactions, a group of computers called nodes must agree on its validity by solving a complex problem. Security comes from the fact that once a block is added, changing any information in it would require changing all the subsequent blocks and getting the agreement of the majority of the network, which is hard to do. This makes blockchain a secure and transparent way to keep track of transactions without needing one centralized authority. Look at this article. According to a forecast by research firm Gartner, by 2026, the business value added by blockchain will increase to over $360 billion. Then by 2030, that will increase to more than $3.1 trillion. With current and future trends, blockchain is predicted to make a big, what's that word? Revolution in the coming decades. I'm telling you guys this so that you know what's coming. So we are on the verge of a new era. That's the best way I can put it. A new era is on the horizon, which is why things feel out of sort, different. We see crumbling economies and, stagnant growth in our GDP and inflation. Things are changing for a reason, and the powers that be know this, but we're just sitting by doing stupidness.